10:43 and the other 10:45, so I'll wait a couple of minutes. So the huh. I also discovered that neither of my laptops were plugged in, so I have corrected that error. All right, I'm going to reconvene our meeting. During the break, I was informed that there are at least one more person who's requested to give testimony, and I missed them. So I will invite that testimony in a moment, and there may actually be two people. So Enrique, as soon as the public testimony is done, I'd like a few minutes of your time as well. So is Connie Hunter with us? And I will declare us reconvened here for a moment.
Yes, I am, sir.
Can you join us and state your name and the nature of your testimony?
For some reason, I'm not able to turn on my camera. My apology for that. Thank you for your valuable time and for being gracious, Chair Cross, Vice Chair Rowe, Executive Director Cannon, and members of this honorable and essential commission. I'm Connie Hunter, Curry County Suicide Awareness and Prevention Council Veterans Task Group Director. Our council was created by ordinance. Although I am not a veteran, I am serving a second term as the council's representative on behalf of veterans, service members, and their families, including family members of our fallen. In Curry County, those collected groups equate to nearly 50% of the population of Curry County. Our county includes the ancestral tribal lands of the Confederated Tribes of the Lower Rogue, not federally recognized. Equity and parity are at issues in my comments today. The Higher Education Coordinating Commission envisions a future in which all Oregonians are served equitably, and especially those whom our systems have underserved and marginalized. Our Southwestern Oregon Community College's Curry campus is perhaps one of the best examples of some of the worst conditions created by these systems. There is no parity clause or guidance provided by the state to community college districts that have a main campus and satellite campuses with regards to financial parity. There is no guarantee for any meaningful return on Curry citizens' tax dollars investments into the college district. Over $2.3 million are collected annually on behalf of the college district from Curry taxpayers. That equates to just under 39% of the total college district's budget. At one point, there was approximately $850,000 only of the $2.3 million being left to provide for Curry campus. Of that $850,000, $400,000 was budgeted for a 2-year nursing program at Curry campus. However, the nursing program has now been cut to 1 year only. So how much of that $400,000 is being cut as well? The cover story is that Curry campus doesn't have the students to warrant any program development. And in fact, there was an effort to trim the program at Curry campus to be a distance learning hub, and even go as far as renting out classrooms for additional revenue to the college district. Curry campus's executive dean, Dr. Douglas Bunn, served at a distance learning hub at Kingman, Arizona before coming to Curry campus. We feel like the writing is on the wall. In addition, the Curry campus marketing dollars are nearly non-existent except to reach out to our students and use them as a pipeline to Curry campus. They're recruiting Curry students to Curry campus. The whittling down of programs, budgets, services have caused severe disparity. This has robbed Curry citizens of one of the anchor institutions of economic and community development. Southwestern Oregon Community College District's Board of Education has not heard the pleas of Curry County citizens or its leaders, even though we have tried to engage them. Our requests for the college district to provide a reasonable return on Curry citizens' tax dollars investment on behalf of Curry campus remain unheard. President Patty Scott has facilitated a cover-up of the truth and continues to be negligent in that the very sanctioning of such disparity happens in a community college district in Oregon, where the state of Oregon and this commission work so hard to fight against disparity. This begs the question, how to assess the damages caused by the actions of the college district's Board of Education to our county's economic development and community development. Regardless, those damages need to be assessed and reparations need to be paid to the citizens of Curry County for the disparity of services, the destruction of a viable program, and in large part enabling the hopelessness that Curry citizens are enduring because this local asset is being taken away. In Curry County, we have had the state of Oregon's worst per capita statistics, including the highest rate of suicide among veterans, seniors, and our young people. The three populations groups most likely to attend classes and community education classes at Curry campus. There are no legal requirements for any Oregon Community College district to financial parity. That is to apportion a return on citizens' tax dollars investment relative to the tax dollars collected from those citizens. In full disclosure, my husband, Professor Ray Skip Hunter, has been a college educator for 40 years, including being a founding faculty member at Mendocino College in California, teaching at community colleges for over 40 years in three disciplines: sociology, cultural anthropology, and Native American studies, even at Curry campus, and also the satellite campus at the College of the Redwoods in Crescent City.
Excuse me, Ms. Sandra, could you wrap up your comments? I think I have a response that we should consider. So,
yes, sir. I'm at my very last sentence. Great. So thank you. He has taught even at the Curry campus of Southwestern Oregon Community College and College of the Redwood satellite campus in Crescent City. However, when he retired from Mendocino College, he retired as their athletic director. We co-coached women's softball at Mendocino College. We are grateful for community colleges. Thank you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for your testimony. This is not the first time this sort of concern has come before the HECC. And we were fortunate to reach some resolution through, I think, fairly creative action by the HECC. And I agree with you, there is no current policy to deal with the issue that you've brought before us, but that doesn't mean we can't pursue a solution. And we, I will discuss with Director Cannon and staff what options we might have to help facilitate some conversation in this process. And any questions for Ms. Hunter? Well, thank you for bringing this issue to our attention, and we'll thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you.
And I got a late note that Dana Richardson might be with us and want to have a few minutes. Dana, are you with us? And was that correct?
Good morning, Chair Cross. I appreciate the recognition. I don't plan to comment.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We're sometimes the remote process is, hard to track just what where we are in the process here. So, okay, well, that concludes our public testimony, and I want to take a few minutes, as I said earlier, to Enrique, you weren't with us when we opened the meeting, and we want to come back to you just acknowledging that this is your last meeting with the commission. And I was commenting on how much I appreciated working with you while you were on the commission, your passion as a representative from the community college perspective and from the perspective of the counselor, a voice that we just so much helped inform our knowledge, our decision making, and a personal thank you for sharing the work out in Lake County with me and holding that public hearing and the support you offered through that process. So, just want to take a moment to thank you for your service to the commission, and realizing that this is one of those odd circumstances in which your advocacy and many others ended up in having you not be a commission member, and that's a huge sacrifice. That when you advocate for something that comes into fruition and you have to sacrifice, something that's dear to you, that's a pretty high calling. So we wanted to acknowledge and thank you for your efforts and in what is likely to be a transformative process for the commission. Anyone else want to comment? Lee.
Thank you, Chair Cross. Enrique, I want to thank you for always reminding us that at the center of what happens at higher education is our students. You continuously brought the student voice in. You're what I consider a frontline worker. You're in the thick of it all the time. You see the transfer hiccups. You see the students with hundreds of credit hours. You see the emotional stake oftentimes with, do I buy a book or do I buy dinner? And I so appreciate everything that you've brought to the meetings with you, and never hesitating to come out and say what was at the heart of on your mind and what you're experiencing. So thank you for your service. And I hope our paths cross often because I do enjoy catching up with you and seeing all the things that you're involved in. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. It's been an honor of my life being part of the HECC. I appreciate all the wisdom. I feel that I got a free graduate class level from Terry and others at a high level thinking, and the advocacy that we all do. It's been an amazing opportunity for me to grow, and this is the highlight of my career, being part of the HECC. Anybody ever asks what's been one of the things that when you look back in your career, the HECC is one of those special moments. So I appreciate everyone here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Enrique. And I'm really glad to be able to put you on the spot today, the right spot. Okay, then we'll move into our consent calendar. We have several items: Columbia Gorge Community College Associate of Applied Science and Advanced Manufacturing and Fabrication, also an Associate of Applied Science and Construction Technology, then from Lane County, an Associate in Applied Science and Aviation and Unmanned Aircraft Systems. Let's see, we take these all together. Lane County, again, certificate of completion in wildland fire management. Oregon Coast Community College, certificate of completion in shipbuilding and repair, level 2. And then the two programs that we heard the testimony about: Mount Hood Community College program proposal for a Bachelor of Applied Science in Cybersecurity, and Chemeketa's program proposal for a Bachelor of Applied Science in Management and Leadership. These, as the consent calendar implies, we handle all of them together, and unless there's anyone who wants to pull one of these out for deeper discussion. I don't see any hands, and so I'd like to call for a motion to approve our consent calendar.
So moved.
And was that Sandy? Moved by Sandy Rowe?
It was me, Ricardo.
Oh, Ricardo. Thank you, Ricardo.
Sandy seconds.
Sandy seconds. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Then a second item, university and college program approvals on our consent calendar. Eastern as Bachelor of Arts and Sciences in Public Relations, Eastern Master of Public Administration, Oregon State's Bachelor of Arts and Science on Contemporary Music Industry, Oregon State's Masters of Arts and Science and Communication, and Western's Bachelor of Arts and Science and Data and Analytics. I don't know if any of you read, how many of you read each of these. There are some very interesting and compelling arguments in their proposals for these approvals. So any questions or comments on the consent items? Anybody want to pull anything out to discuss? Seeing none, I'd call for a motion to approve the consent calendar for university college program approvals.
Good motion. Approval.
I think Sandy beat you a bit, Greg. Sandy moves and Greg seconds. So, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you so much. Next, we call on Kyle and Julia for a legislative update. Kyle, thanks for being with us. Take it away.
Yeah, of course, Chair Cross. Kyle Thomas, Director of Legislative and Policy Affairs with HECC. I'll begin and give you a rundown on a couple of topics, and then Julia will join me and really take the meat of a PowerPoint presentation we have for you today on the details of the Future Ready Oregon package. Just a couple of comments about session, and I'll be shorter than usual owing to the presentation that's coming. We are in it. We've been in it for 10 days now. The short legislative session convened on February 1st. I think as members are generally aware, this is a 35-day constitutionally capped session. And that means that the schedule is extraordinarily compressed. And though we've only been in it for 10 days, any bill that has been introduced to a policy committee, that is committees other than the rules committees or the appropriations or taxation committees must pass out no later than Monday, and then receive subsequent action in the second chamber no later than February 24th, with the session ending on March 7th. Despite that schedule and despite the limitations that generally exist on committees and individual members in introducing bills, this is, I think, has been hat-tipped a far more robust short session in terms of higher education policy and investment, certainly than I have seen in my now 3 short sessions in Oregon, and since there have only been, I think, 6 potentially ever. So we're tracking 3 considerable pieces of legislation. The first is the Future Ready Oregon legislation. That's Senate Bill 1545. That's a $200 million investment that we'll get to in just a moment. And I'll just highlight quickly the other 2 pieces that we're tracking. The first is Senate Bill 1522. This is the Senate Education Committee's omnibus education and higher education package. We support this bill for provisions it contains that modify the Oregon Promise Program that we have been seeking now for a couple of years, notably in the last long session in 2021. We proposed and you voted to approve a package of significant financial aid investment that encompassed not only the Oregon Promise Program, but the Opportunity Grant that was later pared down to a proposal to make some modifications to the Oregon Promise that were more oriented at driving dollars down to the lower income students that received the Oregon Promise. We're revisiting that package this session. And so Senate Bill 1522 contains the provisions that double the minimum award amount that the lowest income promise recipients receive from $1,000 to $2,000, and then index that to inflation, which is tied to the increases in average community college tuition year over year moving forward. The bill also eliminates the $50 per term co-payment that students face, which currently eats up 15% of the current minimum award, but a far lesser percentage of the maximum award that students may receive. It decreases the GPA requirement from 2.5 to 2.0. I think that there are ongoing questions whether the promise should have a GPA requirement at all. The reason that the commission language only reduces the GPA requirement to 2.0 is in part due to the fiscal constraints that we're operating under. Eliminating it would bring the total program cost this year over the legislative adopted budget for the current biennium, whereas by reducing it from 2.5 to 2.0, we project that we can still live within that legislatively appropriated budget for the current year without making changes at the top end that would restrict the awarding structure based on a student's EFC. The last change that we make in terms of the Promise program is we propose to eliminate the first year experience requirement. This was funded as part of the first biennium that the Promise was in force, and then the legislature subsequently did not extend the funding to support the first year experience requirements, but those requirements remain on the books. And so this is we view this as sort of a piece of technical cleanup. In addition to those items related to the Promise, Senate Bill 1522 does make other higher education related changes that I'll just run through really, really quickly. First, it makes a change to the membership of the Transfer Council by allowing high school teachers with expertise in transfer and dual credit who are employed by an education service district to serve on the council. Right now, the language is perceived as limiting teachers who work at ESDs from being eligible for service. So this is language that provides for that eligibility. It extends in-state tuition provisions and eligibility for state financial aid to individuals who are in the United States on certain legal statuses that the federal government provides, such as asylum, temporary protected status, or humanitarian parole. This is an extension of some work that the legislature has been doing over the past couple of years to provide for eligibility to individuals who find themselves residing in Oregon, in many cases because they've been placed here in part through the work of federal government and aid organizations who otherwise would not meet residency requirements because they're new to the state and in fact new to the country. It aligns the state tuition law with federal law with regards to tuition charge for veterans. So institutions are prohibited from charging out-of-state tuition to veterans in distance learning environments, although the state law makes that permissive. And so this is a bit of cleanup language. It alters the provisions of House Bill 3294. This is a bill that was passed last year that requires institutions to provide free menstrual products to students. And in working on this rule, essentially the staff recommendation to the commission in April when it views this rule is likely to be that on-campus residence facilities should be considered educational facilities under this rule. That is, facilities where free product should be provided to students. But in doing so, there would be an issue where all bathrooms in those residence halls would be required to carry those products, including bathrooms that are essentially located within suites and essentially private apartments. And so this language allows for a bit of more nuance with product placement, and you'll hear more about that in the coming months. It contains provisions to deploy educational plan for the deployment of educational technology at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility and Snake River Correctional Institution, part of Senator Dembro's ongoing work to expand educational opportunities to incarcerated individuals. I'm going to make some changes to the faculty part-time healthcare calculations that the commission has just started to administer and will be sending out its first reimbursement checks for in the coming days and weeks. And the last bill, the last policy concept I want to touch on is one that does not have a bill number yet. It's something that Lindsay started to address, and that is that it's the governor's initiative to provide a really robust cost of attendance oriented grant to enrolled members of Oregon tribes. The governor has reserved $30 million for this. The current modeling shows that if we're talking just about the student awards for the current year or for the next academic year, we're looking at spending closer to $18 or $19 million on these awards. But it would provide a grant to a student who's an enrolled member of a tribe, regardless of their current state of residency. So it's the enrollment with the Oregon-based tribe that serves as the only significant eligibility criteria that's placed upon the individual. It would also, almost uniquely, I think we have one other program in the state that provides awards at the master's degree level, but unlike traditional financial aid, this would provide opportunities and awards to students, whether or not they're attempting to complete their first associate's or bachelor's, but also their first master's degree. It would be available for students who attend Oregon-based or Oregon public institutions, but also Oregon-based private institutions. And when the language comes out, you're likely to see language similar to that which we use with other awards, which caps the amount that a student who elects to attend a private institution can receive, tied to sort of the maximum rates that that student would receive if they attended an Oregon public institution. It would also allow the Oregon tribes to continue to support their students in whichever manner they choose. So our award, the proposed award, proposes to discount for state and federal assistance that's provided to the student, but does not discount for any aid that's provided by the tribes directly to the student themselves. And then lastly, as Lindsay indicated, there's a mechanism to establish an ongoing and continuously appropriated fund that could receive proceeds from dedicated revenue sources, but also can receive donations from private entities and the tribes themselves with the intent of developing a pot of resources that can be used to support the fund's sustainability into the long term and to really make it a permanent investment in Oregon tribal students. I have not, as I usually do, included a much larger rundown of bills, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on these or other proposals before I jump to the next topic.
Wonderful news. This is efforts in past years to get a tribal scholarship enacted. This is beyond our imagining. So we really want to thank the governor for her work on this. Ricardo.
Yeah, Chair Cross, I want to extend that as well and echo. I think the initiatives that are happening in the short session are pretty significant for higher ed. So thankful for the governor's office and really making this push. Kyle, I just had one question because the session is moving really fast. Out of the bills that you are tracking, that we're tracking as the HECC, how many of them do you foresee pretty significant fiscal impacts to the commission?
The bills that we're tracking with significant fiscal impacts are really the bills that we're talking about today. It's the three that we're talking about today. There are, I get a new fiscal impact statement email every 45 seconds into my inbox. So there are, I want to be very clear, there are plenty of other bills out there that have much more minimal fiscal impacts to either the commission or the institutions themselves. And there are bills out there that directly appropriate dollars to institutions, usually OSU for their agricultural work, or there's a bill out there that proposes a cybersecurity consortium that has a dedicated fiscal impact to it. But in terms of higher education policy and sort of higher education associated operations of institutions, the most significant are the bills that we're discussing right here today.
Thank you.
Greg.
Yeah, thank you so much. Kyle, I just appreciate your report and excited to hear about the level of attention that the legislature is paying to higher education in this short session. I do want to continue to advocate for the elimination of the GPA requirement for the Oregon Promise. I believe that it perpetuates the structural bias that exists in K-12 and continues to disadvantage those that we state to want to use these resources to most advantage. And if we believe there is structural bias in K-12, then it would seem to me that those who have difficulty achieving the minimum GPA are those students who are most disadvantaged by that structural bias, and to incorporate it into a financial support strategy for post-secondary education would seem to me to simply perpetuate something that we say we want to eliminate. And so I would strongly encourage you and us to continue to advocate for the elimination of that GPA requirement.
Thanks, Commissioner Heyman. I'll just respond to that by saying there are a couple of really good opportunities coming up for us to continue to do that. The first is the Task Force for Student Success for Underrepresented Students, which I'll discuss that process in just a moment. They are, of course, going to be focused as part of their work on affordability and financial aid. And there's even the potential, I think, either as part of the task force or separate from that, that there may be sort of concurrently running a financial aid oriented work group or task force, which we would expect to play a role in. The other upcoming process is the Commission's own policy and budget development process. In the lead up to the 21 session, we introduced a financial aid overhaul. I think in the lead up to the 23 session, we're certainly looking to do the same, although I think we seek to improve the stakeholder and community engagement work that we did as part of that a couple of years ago. And so, yes, this is an issue that I think we continue to look for opportunities to address.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Any other questions for Kyle on what he's presented so far? I don't see any additional hands, so Kyle?
For time, I will be much more brief on the Task Force on Underrepresented Student Success, but there is information on this process in your package. In short, that task force has met a couple of times. It's conducted, I think, primarily organizational and agenda setting type activities. In January, Representative Alonso Leon held 2 large planning meetings that included dozens of community and institutional participants to establish a structure and a schedule for how the work of the task force will be undertaken when the task force reconvenes following the legislative session that ends this month. The structure that they intend to adopt is one which provides for both task force meetings that would take place either in Salem or remotely, as well as a separate sequence of site visits. So the current proposed schedule of the task force has 5 site visits, each of which would encompass multi-day swings to different areas of the state. and quite robust schedules on each day. The proposed schedule is about 9 hours long, and it includes meetings with community leaders, faculty, student support staff, classified staff, dedicated student roundtables, where students would sit and legislators would rotate through over the course of 2 or 3 hours. It would include site tours and dedicated public hearing time. And that's all separate from the investigative, the sort of deliberative work that the task force will undertake in its non-site visit oriented meetings. And those meetings right now are proposed to be thematic, based around certain topics. And the topics there are leaning towards are admissions, financial aid, retention, and graduation in the workforce. Those are obviously very, very, very broad topics under which you could squeeze a lot of more specific agenda items. HECC has a role in the task force. We have a role in all of it, of course. When it comes to the task force meetings, we've been asked to help program those meetings, specifically by bringing in the voices of outside experts that the task force may not otherwise be able to reach without some of our assistance. And so we're currently in the process of developing a list of individuals we think either because they have research experience, experience running a program that is viewed as a national leader program in a specific area, or because they are conversant and expert in campus culture and equity topics that we can bring in to really help the task force both learn and kind of wrap their head around what exists outside of the state of Oregon that's worth turning towards. In addition, of course, to highlighting and supplementing the good work that's already ongoing in the state. And I'll stop there on that and see if there's questions.
Greg, your hand is still up. Was that a question or no? Lee.
Thank you, Chair Cross, and thank you, Kyle, for bringing this important information to us. I'm just curious on the time frame. I see that some of these visits will occur during summer months, which are often not a very busy time on some campuses. And I'm just wondering, especially when you want to, include student voice and other aspects. Has there been conversation about that at all?
I think everyone, thank you, Commissioner. I think everyone recognizes that is less than ideal. I think also that because of the COVID situation, the task force activities have just simply been delayed in getting off the ground. And so in order to reserve the end of 2022, which is when the task force will need to sort of comb through everything and develop its recommendations for the 23 legislative session, you're left with the result that you see and have just commented on, which is some of these site visits simply are going to occur during less than advantageous times. I think everyone recognizes that that's not where we wanted to be, but it is where we are, unfortunately.
Well, will there be an opportunity for students who would like to participate to do so through maybe a hybrid version of folks on campus, folks on Zoom?
I believe they are considering that. HECC does not control the administrative part of this, but in the planning meetings that I've been involved in, that question has come up, and I think they are, yes, leaning towards hybrid participation. They're definitely leaning towards allowing remote participation in the task force meetings outside of the site visits. So, and there will be dedicated public hearing time at those meetings as well. So even though the task force may be on a particular student's campus, they certainly don't need to limit themselves to participation only during that specific 1 or 2 day window.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll hand it back over to Julia. Is that complete your words, Kyle?
Actually, you gotta bear with me for just a couple more minutes, Chair Cross. I will lead this presentation and then I'll hand it off to Julia for her portion, if that's all right.
That would be great. Thank you.
So we're going to talk about the Governor's Future Ready Oregon proposal now, and I'm going to make some background comments and then get out of the way so Julia can describe point by point the elements of this package. But we'll do 3 things today, which is describe the current state of the Oregon workforce, highlight the Governor's Racial Justice Council's role, and then turn to the finer detail of the investments that are being proposed. So despite the enormous job losses and skyrocketing unemployment rates that were seen during the pandemic recession, our economy has rebounded extremely quickly, and we're essentially where we were pre-pandemic. Since the beginning of 2021, Oregon has added over 100,000 jobs, and our unemployment rate is extremely low, nearly as low as it was pre-pandemic, and our civilian labor force is the largest it's ever been. At the same time, in summer 2021, Oregon businesses reported nearly 107,000 job vacancies, the most since Oregon began its job vacancy survey in 2013, and continuing the pre-pandemic recession trend. That means, just like before the pandemic hit, the labor market is very tight, and employers are having trouble finding skilled employees. The data show that while we still have some workers sitting on the sidelines due to COVID-related reasons, including childcare and health concerns, the real issues existed before COVID, an aging workforce and a lack of skilled and experienced applicants. The table on the right shows job vacancies by sector pre-pandemic. For 9 out of the top 15 industries, more than 50% of their vacancies were difficult to fill. And these difficulties have only been magnified by the pandemic. In fact, the number of difficult to fill vacancies has nearly doubled. Despite the strong economic situation before the pandemic and the recovery Oregon's experienced, too many communities have been left behind. A recent report commissioned by the Workforce and Talent Development Board and Work Systems, Inc. found deep disparities in income inadequacy across race, ethnicity in Oregon. And income inadequacy refers to an income that's too low to meet basic demands, basic needs without public or private assistance. You can see almost half of Black households in Oregon have incomes that do not meet basic needs, more than double the percentage of white families. This wage disparity is due in part to the industries of employment for each racial and ethnic group. And the Commission is also fully aware that educational attainment is also a factor. And we know that there is a wage premium for post-secondary credential attainment. And while we've made real gains over the past 10 years on increasing bachelor's degree attainment, decreasing the number of Oregonians with less than a high school diploma or the equivalent, and narrowing racial ethnic gaps, we still see large disparities. And this is the backdrop from which the Governor's Racial Justice Council convened a workforce work group. The mission of the workforce work group was to develop a Future Ready Oregon proposal for the February 22 legislative session that makes strategic and targeted investments aimed at making Oregon's workforce system more equitable and racially just. Membership included representatives from the full Racial Justice Council, business and industry, education and training providers, the workforce development community, and labor. The work group agreed that any proposal must be centered on racial justice, investing in culturally and linguistically specific career-connected learning, and the recruitment, retention, and career advancement opportunities for people of color and other underserved and underrepresented communities, including women, veterans, incarcerated or formerly incarcerated individuals, and those from low-income or rural communities who are adult learners, dislocated workers, and disconnected youth. Future Ready Oregon focuses on 3 key sectors: healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. With increased investments in infrastructure and housing, an aging workforce, and record retirements, workforce needs in these skilled trade sectors are projected to grow. These sectors provide short-term pathways to meaningful employment, higher earning potential, and opportunities for economic mobility. Originally, instead of the technology sector, the bill included construction as one of the 3 priority sectors. But after significant feedback from partners, the governor's office decided to make a change. Future Ready Oregon 2022 proposes $200 million in investment in Oregon's workforce system that utilizes existing infrastructure to expedite short-term solutions while making investments in innovative solutions that aim to address inequities in the workforce system. It prioritizes key populations and advances collaboration and partnerships with diverse community-based organizations and workforce education and training providers. And now I'll turn it over to Julia, who will go point by point into the specifics of several of these investments.
Thank you, Kyle. Chair Cross, members of the Commission, for the record, my name is Julia Steinberger, and I'm the Interim Director of the Office of Workforce Investments. I'm told we're quite short on time and have some subsequent presenters with tight deadlines or cutoff times, so I apologize for going through these slides pretty quickly. The first investment in Future Ready Oregon that leverages existing success is an investment in local workforce development boards. It's $35 billion, million dollars that will support local workforce development boards to increase local service capacity to provide start to finish career coaching services, referrals to skill development and training opportunities, and referrals to wraparound support services. Funds will also support earn and learn opportunities like paid internships and paid community service work. And funds will also help scale up wraparound services and supports like childcare, housing, transportation, etc. Next slide. The next investment in an existing program is $17 million in post-secondary career pathways. This investment will fund a full-time coordinator at each community college for career pathways, recruitment and re-engagement efforts, student support services, including initial intakes to identify support needs and connect students to appropriate resources, and strengthening individualized education and training student pathways for adult basic education students by providing funding for resources like tuition, books, and fees, but also supplies like hand tools or work gloves. Next slide. Next, the package includes a $20 million investment through the Bureau of Labor and Industries Apprenticeship and Training Division for expanding registered apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship. And this investment will both increase BOLI's capacity to recruit new programs and facilitate innovation in apprenticeship, and also create a new state apprenticeship grant program that will grant funds to organizations that offer apprenticeship programs and associated wraparound services. Next slide. The package also includes $10.5 million for the Youth Development Division to expand existing grant programs that they run. The Youth Development Division aligns systems and invests in communities to ensure equitable and effective services for opportunity youth ages 6 through 24. And YDD supports educational and career success, disrupts youth crime and violence, and affirms youth strengths and safety. So again, these funds will support YDD to expand current grant programs that are focused on re-engaging disconnected youth through workforce and career-related opportunities. The final proposed investment in an existing program is $10 million to scale up credit for prior learning. As you may recall, in 2012, the legislature passed House Bill 4059, which aimed to reduce obstacles for Oregon residents in receiving academic credit for prior learning, and it's been recognized as a best practice nationally. But the work has really been hampered by a lack of dedicated funding. So this funding would support professional development around credit for prior learning for community college and public university staff, increase data collection capacity in the associated data systems, faculty and staff engagement in credit for prior learning expansion efforts, the development of reference materials for credit for prior learning related to high value credentials, and regular assessment of the implementation of Oregon's credit for prior learning standards. So now I'm going to talk about the new investments included in the bill, or the investments in new programs included in the bill. One thing that was absolutely clear through the Racial Justice Council's workforce work group is that in addition to investing in proven successful programs, we also need to try doing things differently. And that means investing differently, encouraging innovation, broadening the partners that comprise our workforce system, et cetera. And workforce readiness grants are intended to do just that. So the bill invests $95 million in a new workforce readiness grant program that will be administered by the HECC and available to community-based and nonprofit organizations, education and training providers, local boards, and others. And the opportunity will be broken into 3 different categories. First, providing direct benefits to individuals, like for the cost of attending a training program, and also wraparound services like transportation, housing, childcare, et cetera. The second type of grant will be around developing career pathways. So developing industry-informed and culturally and linguistically appropriate credential pathways, as well as associated career-connected learning opportunities and the necessary infrastructure to run these programs. And then finally, there will be a grant type that is focused on organizational capacity building to ensure that smaller community-based organizations have an opportunity to participate in this grant program and really are brought into the workforce development system in Oregon. Next slide. The second new investment in this package came out of the Workforce and Talent Development Board's Continuous Improvement Committee. The committee conducted an assessment of Oregon's workforce system and found two key findings. One, that job seekers and employers are seeking a more human-centered and relationship-based approach, but often find current service delivery to be transactional. And then second, that WorkSource Oregon, our one-stop centers, are not seen as cohesive one-stop centers, and the system in general is seen as fragmented. Folks often get passed around from program to program, from person to person. So the intent of these benefits navigators are to serve as a single point of contact for customers as they enter and make their way through the system and really direct them to the benefits and programs that are available to them. And then the final new investment is in the creation of statewide industry consortia in healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. I apologize, the construction is from before an amendment that happened this week. These consortia will improve systems alignment among diverse economic and workforce development partners and education and training providers, create efficiencies in employer engagement, and really provide a platform for collective action and decision making at the statewide level. Next slide. So during the implementation of all of this, we'll obviously need to measure impact. And to do so, this proposal includes $1.5 million to support assessment, accountability, and continuous improvement. And these funds will really increase HECC's capacity and infrastructure to collect, integrate, and analyze and report on key data. Key performance metrics that are identified in the bill include the number of Oregonians entering and completing high-value credential pathways, job placement rate and earnings for education and training participants, high-value credential pathways developed, including new registered apprenticeship programs, and the types and amounts of wraparound services provided to individuals. And this is just a summary slide of all of the investments. I'm happy to take any questions, though I know we're very short on time.
Any questions for Julia? What an exciting set of opportunities. This is amazing. Julia, the question I have is about the work of the Adult Learning Advisory Committee. I know there were several aspirations coming out of that. Can you connect any dots for us here?
Thank you, Chair Cross. Absolutely. I think that the work of the Adult Learner Advisory Committee will be extremely important as we implement some of these programs. The legislation refers to high value credentials, and so I think the work that that committee did around credentials that work and identifying what credentials really prepare students for direct entry into the workforce will be integral to implementing these grant programs.
Yes. Commissioner Fajardo has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Cross. I appreciate the thinking with the ideas, the fresh ideas, and the innovation. And I guess, and I also appreciate your comment on the accountability and assessment. I guess my question is, do we kind of periodically take a look at our portfolio of programs and then renew intentionally, keep what's working and then maybe adjust what's not working, or even drop those programs that, according to the data, are not as effective as they could be?
Thank you, Commissioner. I can speak for the Office of Workforce Investments and our competitive grant programs that we currently have. We certainly do look at the results of our grant that our grantees provide to us and take that into consideration in future funding rounds. And I certainly think that will be a part of this effort as well, particularly for the competitive workforce ready grants.
Thank you. And Commissioner Edwards.
How are you planning on tracking the human-centered shift?
Thank you, Commissioner. That's a great question. And I think mostly that is going to be determined in the implementation phase. And we'll definitely want to get input on how we should be tracking that from a variety of partners. And part of the implementation effort will be to put together different work groups of folks to help us think through issues like that you just raised. But we do, the Continuous Improvement Committee of the Workforce and Talent Development Board in the last legislative session was codified and is required to every other year conduct an assessment of the workforce system. And as part of that assessment, we expect that surveys and focus groups and interviews with individuals who are utilizing the workforce system will continue to be part of that assessment process as well.
Thank you. Any further questions? Well, thank you, Julia and Kyle. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is equity update. And we have a panel that's presenting Alex Asanso, I think, Vivi Khalifi Richard, Tanya Cooper, Amy Lambert, and Marco Vasquez today. Do okay on that? Yes.
Pretty good, sir. Pretty good. Oh, good morning, Commissioner Cross and everybody, and Happy New Year, because I haven't seen all of you, so I know it's February. But for the record, my name is Rudy Ann Rivera Lindstrom, and I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion here at the HECC. And my part in this is gonna stay really small because I really want to spotlight the amazing leaders and experts that are doing this DEI work in all around in our institutions here in Oregon. And so I'll share my slides, but we'll jump into our presenters here in one second. And so hopefully I won't have any tech issues. Here we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. From beginning. So we'll start. Oh, good. I saw a couple of my colleagues, and so I just a reminder of who these wonderful people are. Before I arrived at the HECC, the HECC already had established an equity advisory committee that consisted of our diversity officers in our institutions. And so the purpose of this group is to collaborate with us on legislative work, to network, and then be thought partners to address problems of practice and how we align the work moving forward. So who just what it looks like in our state. Of the 7 public universities, 6 currently have formal positions and offices for DEI. We're really excited that Western Oregon currently is in the process of hiring their new position. And of the 17 community colleges, there are 8 specific roles dedicated to this work. And I believe another community college is also in the works of creating that role. And so we wanted to bring this group forward because the last time I was with you all, there was expressed interest in just hearing more about how the work is looking here in Oregon. And we wanted to start with this first group, recognizing that if I had it my way, I would have loved to bring everybody along in this, but I'm hoping that this will be the first in a series of informational and discussion topics around this work and how it's being operationalized. So without further ado, we will jump right in with University of Oregon.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Rudy Ann, and thank you, Chair Cross and other members of the HECC for all of the work that you're doing to lead our state in this important work. I am going to talk about what's going on at the University of Oregon, specifically focusing on student success. And my presentation is within the context of what is being led by President Schill in collaboration initially with Vice Provost Danica Scott and now currently with Vice Provost Kimberly Johnson. I'm going to focus specifically on the Center for Multicultural Academic Excellence and talk about it with respect to the larger goal. So over the last or since 2015, the University of Oregon has worked really hard on increasing our four-year graduation rates, about 10 points since 2015. And a model program in that effort has been the Center for Multicultural Academic Excellence, which focuses on providing scholarships for diversity excellence scholars. There are about 350 diversity excellence scholars representing all of our schools and colleges across the university and some of our graduate and professional students. And what's really special about this program is that while the University of Oregon has been successful in raising its graduation rates, the CMA students, these diversity excellence scholars, are 15 points above university average with respect to graduation rates. And when we look at student persistence, these students are also at least 4 points above in terms of maintaining and staying in school from the first year to the sophomore year. So it's a model program that really is important because we focus not only on students, but also on individual or institutional equity issues. One thing that we know is that when we approach the issue of equity from looking at institutional barriers and the extent to which these structures can be removed and putting in place resources that provide students with an opportunity to succeed and excel, those two things together have helped us. And so the wraparound services, some of them include, in addition to advising and tutoring, we build community initially when these students come in through a retreat. There's ongoing community building. There are faculty involvement efforts. So if we find out that our students are having problems with a particular faculty member, we make sure that there's involvement in recruiting them to provide student support. And there's also a focus on off-ramps. We have a leadership enhancement internship program that provides our students with internships that help them to become career ready as well. So when you're thinking about sort of impacts and resources, at least from our standpoint, resources and impacts that focus specifically on institutional barriers, focus on assessment and the extent to which institutions are dealing with those barriers and removing those structures, and understanding the unique and important role of equity. My final comment is the recommendation of this book, From Equity Talk to Equity Walk. It's an excellent book that features some of the leading research coming out of the Association of American Colleges and Universities. I'm happy to take questions, but I will leave the rest of my time for other members of our team. Thank you so much.
Okay, next we have Marco Vasquez from Rogue Community College.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marco Vasquez. I am the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Coordinator for Rogue Community College. And within Rogue Community College, here's a statement from our president, right? We're committed to closing our students' achievement gap resulting from factors that include income, race, ethnicity, gender, and disabilities. We have used the data to identify the gaps and train our employees in higher education for best practices, enabling them to take clear actions to help every student succeed. RCC is very privileged to be part of this rural consortia. Again, this is a group of colleges that came together, started with 8 rural community college, and now it expanded to 10 community colleges to talk about some of the best practices in regards to equitable and inclusive practices for our campuses. And within the last 2 years, we've been working and doing organizing to support our key House Bill 2864 accomplishments. And within that, we've had the opportunity to build the framework for our cultural competencies committees within each institutions, within the abilities that they can. We have together come with a reporting template. That way it is uniformed in terms of each individual institution. We've also provided some recommendations regarding some of these competencies for our instructors, for our staff, for our community members. We've drafted campus climate surveys, again, identifying each particular need for each institution. And we really centralized our resource for our hubs and training materials. Within the discussion of our rural community college consortia, we've also identified some of these thinking through of our goals, our needs, and our strategies. So within the goal, the consortia would love to develop a culture of importance within the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion within their institutions and at large in their community. The need from a perspective of the rural community colleges is that we are essentially lacking personnel, as Rudy Ann mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. Out of the 17 community colleges, 8 community colleges have a person like myself working primarily dedicated to this work and developing now, I think, 9 community colleges. So we are searching for a model for a shared resources with members of the rural consortia that will assist us to achieve this goal in terms of putting the culture of importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion in their institution and the community at large. One of the strategies that we talked about was to build a professional development package that could be sustained and customized at the community college in higher ed, specifically that facilitate these conversations that talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And looking at that and how that looks like, in RCC, the work that we've done at Rural Community College, because my position is relatively new, it just came in 2019. Prior to me being introduced to the college, we had a diversity programming board. And so their mission was to enrich, support, and celebrate diverse communities by acting as a catalyst for inclusion, continuous learning and understanding and acceptance through engaging and facilitating educational opportunities. This was obtained by monthly productions in what we called Courageous Conversations. And this was mainly a volunteer board with students, faculty, staff, and administrators. When my position was introduced in 2019, my shift really was more of an institutional change for equity, diversity, and inclusion by really coordinating some efforts at the college level. And that means collaborating with college divisions, departments, committees that conducted trainings in regards to LGBTQ safe zone training, green zone trainings, opportunities to provide cultural humility training for our college in collaboration with our faculty through Teaching Learning Center, again, providing the best practices for curriculum building with an equity lens, and also officially having our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council with members that include our VP of People, Culture, and Safety, myself as the EDI coordinator, other representatives from the college, and also bringing a board member from the Board of Education to really have these conversations of how we can have the opportunity to bring this equity lens institutional wide. So that being said, it's an opportunity for us to engage within equity work by having a member like myself in each institution. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Next up, we have our newest member of the group is Toya Cooper at Southern Oregon University.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Rudy Ann, and thank you to commissioners for this opportunity. I'm so grateful to be with you here today in this my almost third official month as Vice President for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion for Southern Oregon University. And the work underway here is one of the things I've been asked to talk about, include in addition to culture and climate, and then what, if anything, I'm thinking by way of state action that we think might be helpful as we continue in this work of EDI. An evaluation of climate on campus right now, what I can tell you as a function of meeting with some pretty significant stakeholders is people are fatigued, as we all are as a function of COVID. There's Zoom fatigue, there's COVID fatigue, there's fatigue of not being able to meet with one another in the usual ways. Conversation with student leaders from our multicultural coalition and our ASSOU, in addition to others, have indicated the same. And so they are looking forward to, I think, not so much going back to normal, but to the pandemic becoming endemic, right? So part of what we expect and innovating around that so that we can continue the good work that we do. Students are hoping to do the same, and they are working toward the same in their various groups. The work that's underway here related to EDI is not unlike the work that's going on other campuses and that you've heard about already. We've had some demonstrable success in things like our pre-college youth outreach programs, as well as our bridge and student support services programs as well. It is amazing the work that all of these groups are able to do in what one of my colleagues at, I believe, Portland State University has called demystifying the process for not just students, but for their families, so that they understand that this is possible for them. As the pandemic persists with us, there is not a diminishing need for students of underrepresented minoritized backgrounds, of low income status, and of Pell Grant recipients as well, needing a navigable path that they understand, that their families and those who support them understand. And so the work that we're able to do in that regard is incredibly helpful. For example, our pre-college youth programs that reach out to our students in our area are showing some remarkable success in terms of increasing the graduation rate for high school students. And we would love to be able to broaden the scope of not just that, but also our bridge programs that help students persist once they arrive here. In speaking with one of the directors, there was an indication, at least anecdotally, there are some students who would not have been able to make it. The strong start funds that we were able to use to expand some of those programs were remarkably helpful in that regard. So sustaining that work and growing it, and then innovating around what we know works would be incredibly helpful. In terms of the state action that we think would be helpful for us as well, we've been talking about it in other groups, and there will be an ask related to the biennial, consolidated funding request for an investment in equity in the Oregon Opportunity Grants, as well as an investment in the programming that we're doing around our campuses that I just described for you, like Bridge, like pre-college and youth outreach, and like student support services. Happy to take any questions, but I know we're short on time, so I'm happy to just pass it on over to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you, Toya. We'll have opportunity as soon as everybody gets through, but thank you so much for that. Next, we have Ame with Portland State University.
Thank you, Gurudian. Good morning, Chair Cross. Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for this opportunity. And I'm delighted to share space with my wonderful colleagues. Last fall, Portland State University welcomed its first predominantly BIPOC first-year class. Our overall undergraduate student body is close to half BIPOC, nearly half first generation, and 79% of our students are from Oregon. These demographic shifts represent a unique opportunity to close equity gaps, support the thriving of minoritized students, and ensure the future of the workforce and leadership class is representative of the state's growing diversity. Today, Portland State is working to support students at every level of Maslow's hierarchy, from our new basic needs hub to strong starts like our summer bridge programs, to retention supports like multicultural retention services, the Atmos program, and Build Exodo, to career and leadership supports. However, this is increasingly challenging to do with a career center that has not grown since 2000. We applaud the work that went into the development of HEC's strategic roadmap, and I'd like to lean into number 2 and number 4 focused on capacity building relevant to current and future state needs, and creating pathways from education and training to career. As you know, technological disruptions mean that some current jobs will be lost and new jobs will be created. Job displacement by automation is projected to disrupt jobs where BIPOC communities are overrepresented, posing a threat, while the creation of new high-paying jobs presents an opportunity to provide access to BIPOC communities long underrepresented in high-paying and high-tech jobs. To ensure that the future is one where BIPOC communities thrive in spite of many urgent threats, PSU is partnering with community conveners to host a series of conversations that will result in a BIPOC-led and BIPOC-centered agenda. We hope the HECC will partner with us in these conversations and in implementing the agendas that emerge, as they will align with the roadmap, with Future Ready Oregon, which we heard about earlier, and complement the work you have been doing in this area. We also ask for continued advocacy so that whenever folks consider workforce development or the future of work, four-year higher education is viewed as a critical space for action and a central partner in this effort. In our desire to meet people where they are, and our realization that there must be paths to financial sustainability for the disproportionately BIPOC folks without a college degree, we need to be mindful to avoid the trap of lowered expectations, even as we recognize different approaches are needed to support success. We must ensure BIPOC and lower income communities have access to a rich variety of capacity building opportunities, pathways, and support that lead to leadership, decision-making tables, and power. Ways to do this, as have been mentioned already, include investing in efforts that provide flexible access to higher education at every stage of life, including through the use of credits for prior learning, hybrid and other effective flexible modalities, stackable credentials, and relevant and affirming wraparound support services. We must also continue to invest in high impact practices, and as Toya mentioned, support experiences that demystify the hidden curriculum at every transition point, including as students prepare to enter a workplace that was not designed with them in mind. This investment in higher education, career readiness, and leadership development is critical to support equity and representation in Oregon's future workforce. PSU and our partner colleges stand ready to work with the HECC in this area, including in its effort to increase the numbers of adult workers with post-secondary credentials. You know as well as I do that closing equity gaps and strengthening the state economy are deeply connected and will require leveraging current funding as well as securing sustained funding for success. Our neighbors are making unprecedented investments in college and university-bound students with access, affordability, and capacity building opportunities topping the investment list. As you already know, and I learned as a newbie, in 2009, Washington passed the Workforce Education Investment Act, supported with $1 billion in new revenue through a ballot initiative that was led by key state businesses. And last month, California announced a $175 million initiative that will provide up to 6,500 students with paid service learning opportunities. This effort will increase engagement, especially for BIPOC students, support community-based organizations, and reduce student debt. With the Student Voices Task Force and significant changes in legislative leadership in the upcoming year, there is no time like the present to collaboratively push for state investment to meet the shared goals articulated across our campuses and in the strategic roadmap. The promise of Portland State University is that we can be a place where students, especially minoritized students, can discover and fulfill their potential, where they can find or rediscover their voice, where they can develop agency and refine their values and purpose. We look forward to continued partnership to make this promise a reality for our students and our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ame. And last but not least, we have Vivi with Chemeketa Community College, and then we'll open up for questions and discussion. Go ahead, Vivi.
Thank you so much, Rudy, and good afternoon. I think it's officially afternoon. Chair Cross and commissioners, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm going to start and talk a little bit about context around Chemeketa. I think some of the challenges that we've experienced, and I've been asked to connect some of the work that we do to the strategic plan that was just recently shared by the HECC and HECC's strategic priorities. So some of you and a lot of you are familiar with Chemeketa, but many of Chemeketa students are low income, they're place bound, they are working or facing recent layoffs, they're supporting their families, they often are pursuing their higher education with minimal or no financial or family support. I think one of the things that is unique about Chemeketa, and luckily a lot of other institutions here in Oregon are reaching that as well, but Chemeketa is a federally recognized Hispanic serving institution. More than 28% of our students identify as Hispanic or Latinx, and 36% of our students are Black, Indigenous, people of color. One of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about too is our context as a community college, and I think also our emerging reality that we've all been talking about, due to COVID and changing things. I think it's brought so many possibilities for us. I think we've implemented new technology. We're having an opportunity to look at systems in different ways. It's also laid bare some significant gaps in access and opportunity. I think like many other community colleges in the state and also the nation, Chemeketa has seen some enrollment declines in the last several years that has become even more precipitous in the wake of the pandemic. Some of the college transfer courses for us are the ones that have shown the largest drop. And so considering this reality, I think this enrollment picture has some significant implications for equity. As a community college, I think we face this conundrum, right? Like we have declining revenues due to the declining enrollment, and we also have some proven strategies that support our most marginalized students. And those strategies are often very, very costly. I think one example that comes to mind is that we have some programs like, for example, ethnic studies that support the success of our racially minoritized students, also promotes this cross-cultural engagement, understanding. And those are, some of the courses that when students take during their academic journey, they are more likely to succeed. However, those courses can be more costly to offer, right? They don't experience the same levels of enrollment of those more general education courses. So I think some of the things that we do that connects directly to some of the strategic priorities from the HECC, one of them is around creating and supporting a continuum of pathways from education and training to career. Some of the current initiatives at Chemeketa that show some promise are guided pathways paired with career pathways, and also some core requisite models. So students kind of have a more straight line through developmental education. Also, we know we've all been talking about strong support, right? And support through camp, TRIO, our Hispanic Serving Institution grant provided some opportunities to provide some identity-based programs that provide that culturally relevant, that affirming support that our students need. The other one I wanted to talk about is ensuring that post-secondary learners can afford to meet their basic needs. I think the Oregon Promise is a movement in the right direction. I want to echo comments from Greg Hammond. I think it's, obviously a very good program. It offers tuition funds through a process that I think can be more easily accessible to our students, because they have obviously the financial barrier, and but families don't just have the financial barrier. Oftentimes they lack financial literacy, so which then becomes a larger hurdle for students to overcome. Another promising practice is the inclusion of a benefits navigator at each college, thanks to the legislative session. And also a very promising practice. 65% of Oregon Community College students experience some type of basic needs insecurity. So the data shows that this is a movement in the right direction. I think moving forward, there is obviously so much work ongoing to address disparities in higher education. I think from the legislative task force on underrepresented students to this Future Ready Oregon bill, right? I think there's this palpable sense of urgency in supporting our students and our most marginalized students. One of the things that I would urge is the careful consideration, like this keen attention to representation during decision-making processes as these things evolve, right? Who is at the table, and also continuing to centering the experiences of those who have been historically marginalized, and thinking of the stakeholders who are at the table also, right? There's some leading experts in equity. Are they helping inform those efforts? And I think, as I've heard from Ami's comments, and not exactly paraphrasing what she said, but I think one of the important things for us to avoid is tracking marginalized individuals to stereotypical career opportunities. I think that has been done before, and we know that it's not effective. And I think that our efforts should result in both long-term fulfilling career and a living wage, right? It's not just the living wage for today, it's the living wage for the future as well. Another thing is community-based organizations, so social service agencies. I think the opportunity for them to become ever more connected to community colleges and vice versa. I think this is the kind of synergistic work that colleges are already doing with DHS to serve SNAP recipients that will go, hand in hand with the Future Ready Oregon bill if it passes. So I think college transformational work needs to be linked to community transformational work, right? It goes hand in hand. The more the state can fund and incentivize efforts to connect identity-based community support networks with community colleges, the more students, and especially those who need it the most, will be able to succeed. So I'll answer any questions and also open up for questions of my wonderful, wonderful colleagues. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Vivi. So yes, so now we would definitely love to hear reactions or questions to the information presented. We were really excited to bring both university and community colleges together to recognize that the DEI work, although everybody has the specific needs and serves specific demographics, the DEI effort or approach on operationalizing and impacting every part of that system connects us all. So I was just really excited to bring this first group together. So,
Rudy, let me I just want to interject in consultation with Director Cannon. We've decided to postpone the equity or the ethics training to a later meeting to free up some time. So I just wanted to let my colleagues know that we've got time to ask questions of this panel, and we will try to take our break at 11:25 as was planned on our original agenda. And I think Larry had his hand up first.
Yeah, and this may cause you to regret saying that we have more time, Terry. Cross. First, I just really want to thank you all for the incredible presentations and the insight into the work that you're doing and the transformation that's happening on our campus. Is just being able to hear the stories of the work that's being done, but particular outcomes of that work. Just a few things that struck me that I think are really important for the work that you are doing. One of the things that became really clear is the emphasis on manipulating the environments, policies, procedures, practices, rather than the historic practice of manipulating students. Right? That the deficits exist with the environments. And we need to think about the environmental deficits. And then you all just have is a really wonderful manifestation of how you all have flipped that script and are doing it in a way that's really going to sort of offer opportunities for a more hopeful future for folks who are seeking out higher education. And then the final thing I want to say, and hopefully colleagues at HECC and others are doing backflips over the idea of how this resonates so much with what we heard from presidents and board members. That this idea that we really do need some innovation. And particularly innovations around the ways that courses are offered, the way that programs are structured, the way we think about things. And I think about just one thing that Vivi said, and hopefully I get it correct, that really struck me, was thinking about some of the high impact, low enrollment courses. Historically defined as low enrollment courses, and how we think about that. And we have this model of what we call sort of high cost courses and low cost courses. Maybe that needs to be flipped as well. That the cost of sort of high impact courses that may reach fewer people, but maybe more transformative, or at least highly transformative, need to be looked at in a funding model in a different way. And again, obviously I'm not in that mix around funding, but I just think that points out the kind of conundrums that we face around how we think about those things that are going to serve people who are historically underrepresented and underserved. So I just really want to thank you all for an incredibly enriching presentation.
Thank you, Larry. Helen, your hand has been up for a long time. Is that was that from the last comment?
No.
Or? No.
No, it was
Okay.
a question. It's a question for Amy about you mentioned workforce automation, and that's obviously a significant concern for people, right? And so my question is about whether PSU has research programs in that area. Everyone looks to Boston University, I think it is, and MIT, Asimoglu and David Alter's work, but that doesn't necessarily go into anything that is specific to BIPOC. And there's a lot of anecdotal work and a bit of work by like McKinsey and BCG, sort of from a global perspective. But is there anything local more geographically relevant that PSU is working on as a research program here?
Yeah, so our College of Engineering has a capacity in machine learning and artificial intelligence. That's a specialty of theirs. I will speak to the broader community and the work that there's a SEDS pilot that is really looking at kind of traded sectors, right? Kind of these high-paying niche high-tech sectors. Technology is one of those, and I think there's an opportunity for that work to come together with the higher ed work. And we actually have a mini grant that's seeking to tie those. So I'm excited at the opportunities there.
Thanks.
Thank you. And Greg.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Cross. I think I'd like to offer a few comments that probably echo some of what Commissioner Roper said. This is, first of all, I just want to thank you for this presentation. It's exciting, it's encouraging. It's not just the thought and effort going into, but the kinds of, I think, results that you're getting from that work. And it's good to see that it's being done at so many different institutions and different types of institutions. And so all that's exciting. I have a friend who is at the Center for Community College Research who says that our institutions are perfectly designed to achieve the outcomes we're currently getting. And so I wonder, especially as, issues like, I hate to say it, critical race theory are becoming politicized in our culture, and perhaps not as much here in Oregon yet. What we're thinking in terms of the sort of inherent structures of education that disadvantage certain kinds of students for a variety of other reasons, and just wondering sort of the extent to which you see your role as helping to address those very foundational ways in which we think about what education looks like and how it's delivered, not always focusing on something that I would call what some writers in this area call bolt-on services, which is to take what may be a structurally biased educational model and then put wraparound services on it to compensate for that, but not necessarily look at the foundational structure of the education itself. And I'm just wondering to what extent you as a group are thinking about that and sort of how you might be able to help us to think about what that might look for us. As I was thinking about this comment, I was going back and reading our roadmap preamble, which very specifically states that we recognize that education needs to change at that foundational structural level for us to make the kind of progress that I think we all want. And so I'm just eager to know sort of where that fits into your thinking and how you might be able to help us think more foundationally about that. Thank you.
Anybody want to tackle that?
I will attempt. I will speak from my lens as an immigrant to the U.S. and also a person who's new to Portland. Everything I understand about U.S. history, I learned because I wanted to support student success. And so I see my role, and I would assume that my colleagues will concur, in helping unpack this historical stuff, right? The U.S. is not a country that's steeped in history. We're not going around. And so I do think, because part of our, we don't have huge amounts of power and authority, but we get to influence, right? And so the folks who have access to the levers, it is our opportunity and our responsibility to just kind of widen their lenses and help them understand the structures, right, that are operating. That's my attempt.
Well, yeah, Evie.
Yes, I would just say that the structure has been built based on, the origins of education to begin with, right? Like if you think about who was there, what the purpose, right? Like, so I think we're at a time where we're rethinking what the purpose of education is, right? And I think that's what kind of lends itself into then what does the structure need to look like? I think community colleges are a model that was based on providing access to higher education in a way that, kind of bridges that gap. And I think, obviously I'm biased toward community colleges, but I think we have kind of a lens to what that could potentially look like, is still having in mind of, what barriers is still are in place. But, their scholar, her name is Vanessa Andriotti, and her in her perspective, like we can either completely blow up the system, right? Or we can kind of like, if you were to think about a house, you can kind of move, the rooms, right? And move walls and work within the structure that we have. And I think we are at that place where what we can do is move structures, right? Because the essence of higher education is still there. But there's so much work going on right now that I think is promising and is changing those structures so we can have a better outcome in the future. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. Toya.
By way of example, I will say that it seems to me that one of the things that's happening as a function of COVID is that the needs that are acute are just becoming more acute. And as those needs present themselves, we recognize what's lacking. And if we're going to fix the lack, right, we have to transform the system that keeps feeding the lack. One of the things, by way of example, that I think has been helpful here at SOU, and it's a small step, but I think it can grow, and that's one of the ways I'm thinking, how can we innovate around this? We have a Center for, I think the acronym is Center for Advanced Teaching and Learning. I hope I've gotten that right. And they have begun culturally responsive teaching. And there are courses around that speak to how students learn, right? And if we're speaking to the way in which students learn, we're not necessarily speaking to a system that's designed for the students who aren't learning in the way that the system was designed, right? And if we're going to keep reaching these students in the way that we say we want to, we got to be responsive to them, not to our system. So in my mind, that's one of the ways we can begin thinking about how we can transform things to be more universal in our approach, as opposed to designing simply for those students who are doing well.
And Yvette, I ask you to comment next, and we have a question from Commissioner Adams.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So happy to be a part of this team. And what I would say is, as a political scientist, the question that you're asking really is one of power. How do we have the power to change and transform? And I would recommend a model that's very similar to what is happening with presidents and boards. In other words, when boards want things to change, they talk to the president and they agree on what the priorities are. And the president provides the resources, and the instruction opens the opportunities for transformation. As diversity officers, we have influence, but we don't have a lot of power. And the resources and the successes that we shared are hard won. They are very hard won resources, and many of them we achieved with very limited resources. So the DES scholars that are 10 points ahead of everyone else on campus, they are the least funded students on our campus. They get funding for 12 hours of credit when it takes 15 hours to actually graduate on time. So imagine that barrier. And so while we appreciate the question, I would turn that question back on you and ask you, what should you be doing differently to empower the presidents to more effectively use the resources in their hands to bring about change on campus and in partnership with community? Thank you so much.
Cool. Rakaya?
Ms. Yvette, the challenge has been received. I will think deeply about what you said. Thank you so much to this esteemed panel. Oh my gosh, my heart is warm just listening to you. I have a question for you about the institutions that feed your student population. Do you have colleagues at the high school level or efforts at the high school level to provide similar services for students as they feed up into higher education? Or are you focused primarily on the institutions once the students arrive?
We have TRIO pre-college programs, and they're federally funded and they're embedded in diverse high schools. We also have a senior inquiry program where students are taking courses, and that's a pipeline to college, not just to PSU, but other places. And I know that all of our counselors are connected to like avid counselors in the high school. So there are connections. We all recognize that it is a pipeline and that all of the transition points are super leaky. And so we need to be strengthening those connections.
I would also say that we have two programs similar to that. Sorry.
Great, thank you. Did you have a chance to finish, Yvette?
I was going to say we have similar programs. One, a SAIL program that focuses primarily on issues of class, and the Oregon Young Scholars Program, which focuses on BIPOC communities and Indigenous communities.
Thank you. So I just want to make a comment. Two things. I just saw data on this is national data on achievement of advanced degrees by American Indian and Alaska Natives. And it is, in the last 10 years, there's been a 50% increase in American Indians and Alaska Natives with advanced degrees. And that's such phenomenal increase. And if you look at the literature that's available in now to students in higher education, there's an explosion of Indigenous knowledge and literature available. When my graduate degree I received in 1977, and there were a few articles here and there that, and we had to kind of scrounge to find them. And but what a transformation, and the work that all of you are doing is part of that transformation. The other thing I wanted to mention is yesterday I was interviewed by a consultant for Portland State School of Social Work, and of course I'm a graduate of the School of Social Work, and they're working on a strategic plan, and they asked me about the reputation of the school, particularly through the eyes of Indigenous people. And I said, well, it's a place to go to get a degree. It has a good reputation as social work education, but it's not the place you go to learn how to do social work in the Indian community. And that's what we want. We need a place where Indigenous scholarship is held at equal value to the historic colonial scholarship, and it's and I think that's simply what you are seeing across the board, that when institutions of higher education create a space for learning that is truly inclusive and not just about becoming more European, then we will see the participation rate at our colleges and university in Oregon and other places can grow and really begin to serve the diverse population, and that idea of equity and inclusion will gain its true promise. So, and I see Commissioner Rohith hand up.
Thank you. My question is for Rudy Ann. Are you there? You just popped off my screen. First, I wanted to thank you for the wisdom of pulling this particular group together and ceding all of your time to let us hear these summaries from every school. And that raises the question for me, with your great wisdom there. And I'm sure y'all exchange information all the time and learn from each other and give each other strength. But part of this conversation has been about power. And I'm wondering whether you are able to garner the collective power of all of your knowledge and experiences and the things you're creating in order to influence the boards and the presidents of the universities and colleges. And sort of, if you have the resources you need, Rudy Ann, and what else, is there anything the HECC can do to help make sure the collective strength and benefits of this are sent out to every single college?
Well, Commissioner Rowe, thank you for that amazing question. I don't know where to start with that. I do know I do know that my 2 years at the HECC now, in previous roles, I know I've been in situations doing this work where I know what not to do, or have experienced what it's not supposed to look like when this work doesn't move forward. And I have to acknowledge that being at the HECC, I've been it's been a blessing to be able to be supported by all of you, have an executive team that is equally as equity minded and oriented in the work, and always trying to think through how to do right by it. They hear me when I do bring these concerns, and so the power structure, I don't know that I feel as limited in, as I used to, I guess. And because again, I work with a team that allow me to call in certain aspects of what's happening and have certain considerations, and it seems to be showing up in the work that we're doing. So I'll have to think harder now just to see how else I can be supported to continue to support my colleagues in the field. But what's been really amazing for me to see, and I'm still always trying to pinch myself to see if this is actually happening, is, like I said, is that our voices are starting to show up in very different places, and through us and our positions, we are starting to better connect the work that typically ends up so isolated in different directions, and very, very rarely is connected or looked at as connected. And so we all have a unique positioning in our roles to actually touch every aspect of our system, so we see the connections in the work, which is why this amazing group of folks were able to speak to the different aspects again on how we need to keep moving forward to have that power. The power comes in us in unity and collegiality and strategy. And so having a network of DEI folks, even in rural areas, to know that they have groups like us, there's strength in numbers. And so I think the continued support from you all is very much welcomed. The continued space from you all to bring these issues and this awareness to the forefront is very much welcome. And I'll have to get back to you all. If now that you've kind of opened up a wish list in my head, I'm going to have to narrow it down a little bit to bring it forward. So thank you for that question.
Commissioner Adams, your hand is still up. Did you have additional comment, or was that from before?
That's from before. Clearly, I'm
Okay.
so excited by this conversation that I need to put my hand back down.
Okay. And Commissioner Lujan, we'll take one more question. Your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to echo what Vice Chair Rowe mentioned. I am also excited in trying to figure out ways in which this body can be helpful. And as we heard actually in earlier testimony, right, by Sandy, this morning about the importance of accountability. I think it is important in respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion, how this body can really hold higher education collectively and constructively accountable to applying this across the board, not just having it as a pillar of a mission, but really how is it embedded in all parts of your mission, all parts of your operation, all parts of how you navigate higher education with your students on a day-to-day basis. And mainly because when we talk about, the definition of underrepresented students, I mean, statutorily speaking, each institution gets to define what that is. Who are their underrepresented students? And that allows for a lot of diversity, even in how do we interpret that. And I think there can be some level of coordination and uniformity on how we are achieving a statewide goal of bringing low-income Oregonians, BIPOC Oregonians, into higher education in a welcoming space. So I'm really excited to think about how we can financially support this further, but also just coordinating and holding levels of accountability, even in the tuition setting process, right? Where we welcome and appreciate when the governor's office gives guidance on how to approach some of those conversations. And certainly we will hold conversations about what metrics we will be looking at, but how is equity embedded in all of those aspects of those metrics when we are looking at tuition increases, right? And so really, really excited to have this group, this consortium of professionals and leaders of thought in this space to help us guide us through this. One question that I did have is, I'm wondering if one or two of you all can expand a little bit on how you're also bringing in the individuals in either student governments or multicultural groups of students into this work as well, right? I know that you've mentioned some of them in your presentation, but can you just dive a little bit deeper into how you are really bringing some of the multicultural student leaders of each campus to this space and to this conversation? And while we're talking about power and trying to empower you all as equity officers in your institutions, how we're also empowering the equity leaders in the student bodies to be part of these conversations.
Who would like to tackle that?
I can start.
Amy. Oh, good. Yvette.
Thank you so much. So the Division of Equity and Inclusion has two student-facing organizations within its portfolio. One is the Multicultural Center, which includes the leaders of our student boards, and those are primarily our BIPEC and underrepresented student boards. We hear from them and meet with them on a regular basis. Secondly, whenever there is an SGA or a student government leader, our office is among the first to reach out and to plan in partnership the agenda for the year. We did that this year again and continue to do so. And then finally, we operate in partnership with Student Life, and it does a marvelous job of ensuring that our students are included in important processes. One currently that is underway is the tuition setting process, which engages student leaders across campus in partnership with leaders and with faculty. So that's an effort, but I am eager to hear what other campuses are doing so I can bring those good ideas back to our campus too.
Thank you, Beth. One of the things that thrilled me when I came to Portland State last year was how diverse our student government is. I haven't never worked anywhere with that level of diversity. It's super exciting. So usually we're trying to keep up with the students, right? Just in terms of their commitment to equity and their focus on it. I meet with the president and vice president once a month and kind of working on shared agendas. And then we just convened. We just had our first meeting last week, BIPOC Student Advisory Council, so similar to what Yvette said. And the students want to meet every week. I'm not sure that's possible, but we will make sure that those lines of communication are open. And the last thing I would mention, also related to student government, is that a lot of our student facing units, our resource centers, they're all student fee funded, right? And what I love about the idea is that they kind of have a liaison to each of the centers. So there's an opportunity to constantly be checking in and learning from each other. So super exciting.
Vivi?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we are highly connected with the Multicultural Student Services. One of the things that is really exciting that we just started this year, thanks to a HECC grant that we received, is they're student workers who are embedded in the DEI office and are working with community-based organizations to think about ways to leverage community knowledge and bring to the campus. So for the first time ever, we're going to have a BSU on campus, and it's all student-centered. That's what they wanted to do. And it's so I think, being able to leverage some of the knowledge from community has been really, really wonderful.
Terrific. Well, thank you all for coming, and Rudy Ann, to you, congratulations with convening this panel. This has been marvelous. Let's break for we have a 15-minute break. And so it is 12:40 by one of my clocks here. So reconvene at 12:55, and we'll go right into our conversation with Jim Pinkard on the university evaluations. See you all back in 15 minutes.